Hello and welcome to the BA Knowledge Share. In this episode, we'll talk about use case development specifically tied to the payment processing domain. So that being said, without further ado, let's get started. So let's try to understand what a use case is. Basically, a use case describes a sequence of actions performed by a system that provides value to an actor. The use case describes the system's behavior under various conditions as it responds to a request from one of the stakeholders called the primary actor. So in short, what is a use case? A use case is basically a way to understand what the requirements are from the business. So you as a business analyst can sort of go through this process of building a use case, then building some use case scenarios, and subsequently deriving some functional and non-functional requirements from use cases and use case scenarios. This also feeds into things like the entity relationship diagram, data flow diagram, as well as some more technical aspects of a project. So let's jump right into the next piece of it and understand what a payment processing system is. So we've all been online shopping. So as an example, you as a customer go to, say, for example, a website to purchase clothing. In this case, maybe you go to Amazon to purchase a product. And in that case, there is a behind the scenes system that processes payments. Now, it could allow for credit, debit, checks, as well as allow you to apply coupons. So payments are basically financial instruments that people and corporate globally use to transfer funds. So it's basically transferring funds from maybe your bank account to Amazon or the Amazon sellers, or from the credit card company to the Amazon seller. And therefore, it sort of deducts money from the bank account or the credit card, which ultimately hits your bank account. So this helps corporate to manage cash effectively and efficiently. Payments in itself are very vast because of availability of many payment systems in a given country, and each system has unique ways of processing. At the same time, payment system has to work in accordance with the regulatory requirement of the country. Since each country uses to have their unique currency, it adds additional flavor to processing. In short, in general, when you're building out the use cases for the payment processing system, we'll start off with something that's very basic, very simple. The other things like Bitcoin or even other sorts of methods of payment are just bells and whistles. Once you get the hang of what a use case is, it'll help you sort of build other sort of add-ons in terms of the payment processing system. So in terms of building a use case, the first thing to do would be to understand how to build the use case inventory. And in order to do that, we are going to make a couple of assumptions. One is you want to build the use cases from the perspective of a user. Now, there's some use cases out there that can be built from the perspective of a system, but from a business analyst perspective, your goal should always be to understand what are the business requirements. And this is what we call black box, meaning you're purely looking at it from a user perspective and not from a systems perspective. The scope of building the use case or the use case inventory use cases is basically the one is that it's a web transaction for a shoe website. That's sort of an example here. There aren't any coupons that will be applied, so there's no bells and whistles, and there's ability to pay via debit or credit. Let's understand some terminology. So when we talk about terminology, I'm referring to things that are very commonly used within a use case diagram or building out use case scenarios. One is an entity, right? So an entity is a person, organization, a software agent that is capable of interacting with the world. So think of entity as a noun, not more as a verb. So it's nothing to do with an action, but it's more of a noun, which is a person, organization, or software. Entities come into place later on when you start building your entity relationship diagram, as well as your class diagram. So what is a payer next? A payer is anyone that provides a source of funds as required by a transaction. In this case, a payer is someone like yourself. So in this case, it was a shoe website. You're looking to purchase a shoe as a customer. So you as a customer, you are a payer. Payee is anyone that receives funds. So in this scenario, it would be the shoe website that's receiving funds, or it could very well be, in this case, there could be certain specific business relationships between the shoe website and a vendor. But in your case, for the use case, it's just the shoe website receiving the funds. How they disperse it is not part of the scope of this use case example. So another thing that comes up is merchant. Merchant is, think of them like is the bank, right, or the credit card company. So a merchant is basically someone that holds your money as a customer and that deducts money and sends that over to the shoe website. Customer is the same as, could be the same as a payer. However, if you've seen different options on different websites where you're the customer buying it, but someone else is paying for it, right? So there could be scenarios that way. Transaction. A transaction is an instance of an exchange of value, such as buying or selling something. In this case, a transaction is buying shoes, and the website is selling shoes. Then the next one is payment processor. In this case, we spoke about what the definition of a payment processor is earlier on. It's basically a system to handle transactions of payments between the website, the customer, or the payer, and the bank or the credit card company. So let's move on to the next piece over here. So what I've done is built together a use case inventory of what I thought could be a good example of what a payment processing system should do given you have customers. So if you look at use case number 1, payer Amanda uses the website to purchase shoes. She initiates the payment. Trigger is payment, payer clicks on the payment button. So you're only restricting yourself to the point where the payer clicks a button that triggers the payment processing to begin. The next use case is system verifies availability of funds. The trigger of that would be payer initiates the payment. And then the third use case is the payer receives confirmation of payment. System verifies availability of funds. So let's sort of break this down a little bit further in terms of building out a context diagram. If you've watched my previous videos, I do always encourage people build out context diagrams at the start of a project, just so that they understand A, who the players are, B is what are the inputs and outputs in terms of the system that you're trying to change or you're trying to build. So in this case, if you look over here, there's a payment processing system, which is in the center over here. You have the payer or the customer. The payer makes a payment through the payment processing system, and then they receive a confirmation. Simple enough, right? The next one is the bank, receives a request, and then the money is withdrawn from the bank. The payment processing system withdraws money from the bank. The credit card company receives the request, and then the credit card company money is withdrawn from the credit card company. And then over here, the payment processing, the online store shoe company receives data from the payment processing system, or you could actually say over here, the payment processing system, which is missing, is deposits money into the bank account of the online shoe company. So maybe you can add a line here. You can add as much detail as you want, but in general, this is a very high level overview of what are the inputs, the outputs, and who the players are. The next diagram over here now gets into breaking down those use case inventories that I mentioned earlier into what we call a use case diagram. So if you look over here, your primary actors are your payer. Okay, so primary actor is always someone that's the main actor within your use case. Then you have your online shoe store, your credit card company, and then your bank. And these could be primary actors as well because they're paying their system actors and they're playing a major role. Maybe your online shoe store ends up being a secondary actor. So all it's doing is receiving funds, or the payment processing is sending, processor sending the data. So in this case, you have the payer that makes the payment, okay? The bank or the credit card company will authorize the funds. The payment processing system will send the confirmation because the bank first off would authorize the funds, sends notification over here, as well as the credit card company. And then lastly, the data is sent to the online shoe store. There's many ways to sort of modify this use case diagram, but the recommendation is to keep it very simple. Now, this context diagram is very general so that you as a business analyst understand what the flows are in terms of inputs and outputs. But then this diagram really gets into the details of, all right, this is use case number 1, this is use case number 2. So these bubbles are your use cases, or what's on the use case inventory. This will now help you build out your use case scenarios, which we will be working through in our next video, as well as subsequent videos, how to extract functional and non-functional requirements from the use case scenarios, as well as building a data flow diagram and entity relationship diagram for the payment processing system as well. So that being said, look forward to the future videos on building out requirements using use case diagrams, as well as building out the technical aspects of your project. So without further ado, I'll end this video. Please do visit our website at baknowledgeshare.com, as well as a Facebook page. The link has been provided below, and hope you have a great day, and if this has been helpful for you, please do consider subscribing.